starving.
Just reintroduce yourself for the record, please.
Kevin King, Mesa County resident. My definition of federal overreach is what we've been talking about here, and in this specific case would simply be Bureau of Land Management. Posted a study yesterday that came out that said 75% of the American people, and let me just back up for just a second. I'm coming and speaking on behalf of freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Secondly, for 3 kids who have $50,000 plus of federal debt on their heads when they were born. So God knows where that's going to go if we continue this path. So 75% of the American people, this was a freedom study, believe all government is corrupt. Probably take a poll in here and probably be pretty accurate, maybe even 100% with those that are left. But then I'm starting to think about the other 25%, and I'm thinking they must be the government employees that know it's corrupt, but still defend it. So in the previous comments came to my head, we're talking about wilderness areas and designations. Well, it's interesting. There's a gentleman who wrote a book called Committing 3 Felonies a Day in the Free United States of America. And I'm just going to give one example there because I thought it was pretty relevant to the discussion earlier, and I didn't want to partake in that just because I was going to save it for this. But here's a hypothetical under the Federal Wilderness Act. You're an avid outdoorsman, Brandon Siegfried, for example, and he took off. He's got to work. And you've decided that your next thrill ride is a snowmobile trip in Colorado, or an ATV trip for that matter. You set out on a sunny day, and soon you find foreboding clouds above. Before you can turn back, a blizzard has set in. Lost from your original path, and with your snowmobile out of gas, you abandon it and walk to seek rescue. Luckily, a park ranger eventually finds you. After authorities receive your vehicle, however, you come to find that you have arguably committed a federal felony. When you strayed from your path, you ended up snowmobiling in federally protected wilderness area, thus violating the Federal Wilderness Act. Now, here's a real-life example. Well-known automobile racer Bobby Unser found himself in this exact position in 1997. He spent 2 nights in blizzard conditions. When he was finally rescued by Forest Service rangers, they charged him with the provision of the Wilderness Act that prevented motor vehicles in protected areas. His presumed accident, he claimed he never meant to end up on that territory, did not spare him from the subsequent charges. So there's a real-life example of the hypothetical coming true that we're all sitting here discussing. What if this happens, or what if we allow it to happen and we don't intervene? And so on behalf of this, taxpayers in Mesa County, I urge you to follow this through all the way. I've read Colorado Revised Statute 2920-104 myself, and I think it's very clear the powers that the county commissioners have in regards to public access and roads. I would urge you to spend a little bit more time there, maybe even have your attorney look at that a lot closer, because I think that's where the argument's got to go, specifically with closing the roads. And back up on the last, I think when the BLM was here giving their dog and pony show last time, the regional director stood up here, and it was such an arrogant conversation from him, or at least to his point. The 200 or 300 miles we were down to out of 4,000 miles was really a non-issue for him, and wasn't going to be. I mean, they had, I guess from a standpoint of watching this all the way through from the very first BLM protest that we did at their facility here in Grand Junction, it's almost like we knew we'd end up here. I mean, you almost just see it going to happen. And so here we are. And so what do? Right? Well, I'm a guy that's all about action. And so I'm going to state publicly that if the county commissioners fail to do their duty on behalf of the Mesa County citizens, then all kinds of legal action is going to come forth from that, whether you're in action or BLM overreach. We'll actually focus on those folks as well. But the time is now. There's no more talk. There's no more, let me set up another committee over here. Let's go study this for another 20 years. Come on, guys. Really? How much more debt do we need until we figure it all out, right? And I'm gonna actually give you another insider trading conversation I had with my best friend growing up in middle school, whose brother is in the municipal bond market and has been for quite some time and been very successful in that market. You know what he's telling his brother to do today? Sell all your assets. Sell them all. There is a big storm about to hit that is going to be uglier than you've ever seen. So at the end of the day, all this arguing over federal land is really, it's kind of a smoke and mirrors game, really, at the end of the day. But in reality, what's coming, it's on the walls. We've seen it for years. We've talked about it. It's about to happen. When he's telling his brother to get out of all markets, real estate, bond markets, stock markets, get out. It's coming, people, and it's because we have allowed a government that is the problem and not the solution. We are coming here begging you to be the solution when you're the problem. I mean, what kind of sense is that? You guys have created the problem, and now we're asking you to get us out of it? I don't simply see it. If we don't exercise our local control, like I've said before, and you got to all of you before, what's the point of you sitting here and being our representatives? That's all I have. Thank you.
Kevin, I don't know how to say this, but can you raise some funds so we can afford to do some of these things?
I don't think it's about funding. I think it's about saying, you know what, federal government?
No, I understand
You're
that,
done.
but I mean, I'm just thinking here, looking at our budget and et cetera.
Hey, and that's a great question, Commissioner Justman. I look at it like this. I don't know that I've used a service of the county since I've lived here other than going to motor vehicles to pay another fee and another tax. So I look at it and go, and I've shared this with Commissioner Puglisi. I think we have a great model in Sandy Springs, Georgia, to go all private sector and accept our police and medical. That makes sense, right? We save 50% of your budget right now by just doing that one thing. Let's have that discussion. There's a solution. Nobody wants to listen to it because that 25% that knows their government's corrupt still depends on it. I don't know.
There was another incident, it was 2000, because that's the year our eldest son got married. Mesa Verde, I read it in the paper and other places, but when I think they had a lightning strike, I don't know just where, but there was a construction crew there with a bulldozer, and they said, we can contain this. I mean, it was itsy-bitsy. I believe the Park Service said, no, well, you can't take a bulldozer on our forest, or on our Mesa Verde National Park. That fire burned for a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, but even to your point, Commissioner Justman, that happened with a family's house that, because of taxes that weren't paid on that, or I call it rent, on their property that they owned, because they didn't pay their rent, they wouldn't allow the fire department, refused to come in and put the fire out in their house.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's real life today, and how much more do we tolerate? I'm done. Just FYI.
Thank
you.
you
Thanks.
for your comments. Did you want to say something?